That inhaler isn't yours, Nia. Stop lying. Nurse Marlene Voss said it softly enough to sound professional, but loud enough for every polished parent in the hallway to hear. The little black girl did not cry. She opened her yellow lunchbox with both hands, lifted a pale blue inhaler into the fluorescent light, and turned the white label toward the crowd. Behind them, billionaire Graham Whitaker stopped walking. 20 minutes earlier, Hawthorne Ridge Academy had looked perfect enough to sell itself. White columns, waxed floors, framed Ivy League acceptance letters, and a ribbon of silver satin stretched across the entrance of the new Caroline Whitaker Wellness Wing. Outside, the Atlanta morning was damp and gray, but inside the school everything smelled of lemon polish, fresh paint, and money. Graham Whitaker stepped from a black Escalade with 2 security men, a foundation attorney, and the tired face of a man who had learned how to smile without feeling much behind it. He was 52, tall, white-haired at the temples, dressed in a navy suit that probably cost more than some families paid in rent. His company's name was printed on the banner over the hall. Whitaker Medical Group. Clearbreed Initiative. A promise in clean blue letters that every child deserved air. Graham had paid for that promise after his wife Caroline died, and people praised him for it so often that he had almost stopped hearing the guilt underneath. Near the nurse's office, Nia Brooks stood alone beside the water fountain, one hand pressed around the handle of her lunchbox. She was 8, small for her age, with neat braids tied in white beads and a cardigan faded at the elbows. Her mother had ironed that cardigan before sunrise in their apartment above a laundromat, while the washing machines thumped below and Nia's old phone buzzed once on the kitchen counter with a reminder. Bring receipt. So she had, folded 4 times, sealed in a tiny plastic bag, hidden in her sock because grown-ups had a way of making papers disappear. Nurse Voss came out carrying a silver clipboard. Principal Elaine Cartwright followed, smiling toward the donors as if nothing unpleasant could happen on a day. With photographers, Nia spoke first, barely above a whisper. I need my inhaler. Nurse Voss did not bend down. She did not ask how Nia felt. Her eyes flicked to the lunchbox, then to the parents gathering near the ribbon. We discussed this, she said. You cannot invent emergencies whenever you feel nervous. Nia swallowed. It has my name. That was when the hallway changed. A few children stopped near the lockers. A father in a golf jacket turned. Graham, still half listening to his attorney, caught only the word liar at first. He did not believe the child immediately. Men like him had learned caution, learned that scenes could be staged and reputations could be bait. But then Nia lifted the inhaler, steady as a candle in a draft. On the label beneath her name was the logo of his own program. And Nurse Voss, pale at the mouth, was not staring at Nia's name at all. She was staring at the tiny code printed in the corner. CB 2147. CB 2147 rested there like a number carved into ice. Graham Whitaker did not move closer right away. He only let his eyes stay on it a second longer than politeness allowed, long enough for Nurse Voss to notice him noticing. Her fingers tightened around the silver clipboard against her chest, the kind of clipboard used in clinics and schools because it made ordinary paper look official. Principal Cartwright stepped between them with a smile that had practiced softness around the edges. Mr. Whitaker, I'm so sorry you had to walk into a little medical misunderstanding, she said, turning her body just enough to make Nia smaller in the frame of the hallway. We'll handle this privately. Nia's hand lowered an inch, but not the inhaler. It's not private if she called me a liar out here, she said. The sentence was quiet, almost too quiet, but it landed harder than shouting. A mother in a cream coat looked away. A boy by the lockers stopped pretending not to listen. The vending machine at the far end of the hall hummed and clicked, dropping nothing, its small mechanical failure sounding strangely loud in the silence. Nurse Voss took a breath through her nose. Nia has been anxious lately, she said, not to Nia, but to the adults with money. Children sometimes confuse fear with symptoms. We have protocols for that. Graham heard the word protocols. He had sat through enough hospital board meetings to know how gentle words could be used like locks. He glanced at Nia's face. She was not performing fear. She was counting things. The nurse's hand. The principal's smile. The clipboard. The tiny strip of red paper barely visible beneath the steel clip. My mom signed the form, Nia said. Monday morning. 6-something. She put it in the red folder because you said white papers get mixed up. Nurse Voss gave a small laugh, smooth and brief. There was no red folder. Nia pointed not at the nurse's face, but at the clipboard. Then why is my name under your clip? No one breathed for half a beat. Cartwright's hand moved first. It was not dramatic. She simply reached out and rested 2 fingers over the top of the clipboard, as if steadying it for Nurse Voss. But Graham saw the motion for what it was. Cover, not comfort. His attorney, Claire Benton, shifted beside him, but he lifted one hand slightly, stopping her before she spoke. He took out his phone as if checking the time, angled it downward, and captured one quiet photo of the clipboard, the red corner, and Nia's inhaler still raised in the same frame. Mrs. Voss, he said lightly, almost kindly. May I see the authorization log for this morning? Nurse Voss's lips parted, then closed. Her eyes went to Cartwright. It was the smallest glance in the world, but Nia caught it. She looked at you like that yesterday too, the girl said. Right before the folder disappeared. Graham lowered his phone. Under the metal clip, beside the half-hidden word Brooks, he could now see another mark in blue ink. CB 2147. The blue ink sat beside the red corner like someone had tried to bury the same truth twice. Graham did not ask why it was there. Not yet. He had learned, in boardrooms and courtrooms and hospital wings with too much glass, that guilty people often survive the first question by rehearsing the answer. It was the second, smaller question that made them forget their script. Nurse Voss slid her thumb higher over the clipboard. Mr. Whitaker, with respect, student health files cannot be examined in a hallway. Then stop discussing mine in one, Nia said. Her voice did not rise, but a few parents turned their heads as if the air had shifted. Principal Cartwright's smile thinned. Nia, sweetheart, this is not helping your case. Nia looked at her, and for 1 second she seemed younger than 8, not weak, just tired of being carefully renamed as difficult. Then she bent down and touched the cuff of her left sock. Nurse Voss moved quickly. Nia, do not start emptying your clothes in public. The words were polished, but there was a sharpness under them that made Graham's security man glance up. Nia froze only long enough to decide not to be embarrassed. She slipped 2 fingers inside the sock and pulled out a tiny plastic sandwich bag, folded flat from being pressed against her ankle all morning. Inside was a receipt, creased into quarters, the paper soft at the corners but dry. She held it against her lunchbox before unfolding it, careful, as if it were something fragile and not just proof that adults had failed her. My mama said paper gets wet, she said. So I wrapped it. Graham stepped closer now, just 1 pace. The receipt showed the logo of Whitaker Medical Group, the name of a community clinic on Memorial Drive, and a timestamp printed in faded black ink. Monday, 7:42 a.m. clear breath pickup confirmed. Nia Brooks. Albuterol. Dispensed to student. Under it was Tasha Brooks's signature, slanted and tired, the kind of signature made by a woman hurrying from one shift to another. This says the medication was released to her, Claire Benton murmured, barely moving her lips. Nurse Voss gave a small, breathless laugh. Children can carry papers they do not understand. I understand that number, Nia said, pointing to the receipt. It matches the one on the inhaler. CB 2147. The vending machine hummed again. Somewhere down the hall, a classroom door clicked shut. Principal Cartwright reached into her blazer pocket, glanced at her phone, and immediately turned the screen toward her body. Graham saw only the top of a message before it vanished, but he saw enough. Keep donor moving. No records in hall. Nurse Voss's face had changed. Not fully. Not in a way most people would catch. But the calm had gone tight around her mouth. Graham looked from the receipt to the hidden red paper under the clipboard, then back to the inhaler label in Nia's hand. Mrs. Voss, he said quietly, why does the receipt say dispensed to student if you're saying the inhaler was never hers? Nia did not look at the nurse this time, She looked at the receipt, then at the clipboard and whispered, "Because it was hers when the clinic gave it to me, but not after I walked into the school." The sentence made the hallway colder than the air conditioning. Because it was hers when the clinic gave it to me, but not after I walked into this school. No one answered right away. Principal Cartwright's smile returned first, thinner now, sharpened by control. "That is a serious accusation for a child to make," she said, and somehow serious sounded less like concern than warning. She guided the group away from the hallway before the donors could gather too tightly, through a glass door etched with the words Caroline Whitaker Wellness Wing, into a private office that smelled of new carpet, hand sanitizer, and white lilies arranged in a vase too tall for the desk. The room was built to make people feel safe if they already belonged there. Leather chairs, framed donor plaques, a wall-mounted screen sleeping in black glass. Nia sat at the edge of the smallest chair with her yellow lunchbox on her lap, her sneakers not quite touching the floor. Across from her, 2 board members stood with coffee cups, speaking in the careful voices adults used when they wanted a child to feel rude for existing. "We all want what's best for Nia," one of them said, a woman with pearls and a soft southern accent. "But there are channels for these things." Nurse Voss placed the silver clipboard on the desk, turned it face down, and folded her hands over it. "Exactly. We cannot allow medication claims to become hallway theater." Nia looked at the clipboard, not the pearls, not the lilies. "It wasn't theater when I couldn't breathe in gym," she said. The room went still, not because she had spoken loudly, but because she had spoken plainly. Graham stood near the door, one hand in his pocket, his expression unreadable. He had not chosen a side. Not yet, but he watched how the room arranged itself without being told. Adults in chairs, lawyers near the walls, a child in the center, made smaller by furniture and language. Rain began to tick against the office window, light and steady. For one brief moment, the sound softened everything, like the building itself was trying to breathe. Then Cartwright clicked a pen. "Mrs. Voss, please show Mr. Whitaker that the medication cabinet is properly maintained. We can end this confusion before the ribbon ceremony." Nurse Voss rose too quickly. She crossed into the adjoining nurse's room, a spotless space with white curtains and a gray metal cabinet against the wall. Graham followed. Claire followed him. Nia stood too, but the board member in pearls lifted one hand. "Sweetheart, maybe stay seated." Nia did not sit. She only held up the receipt. "The number goes where I go." Graham glanced back at her then, and something in his face changed by 1 inch. Nurse Voss unlocked the upper cabinet, showing bandages, gloves, antiseptic wipes, everything in perfect rows. "As you can see," she said, "student medication is never accessed without documentation." But when she turned to close it, her elbow brushed the lower drawer. It slid open less than 1 inch, just enough for Nia to see 5 pale blue caps lined in a dark row, each with a white label wrapped around the side. Nurse Voss pushed it shut fast, too fast, and Graham, reflected in the black glass of the sleeping screen, saw the name on the nearest label before the drawer clicked closed. Malik Reed. Malik Reed. The name stayed with Graham even after Nurse Voss closed the drawer, even after Principal Cartwright laughed softly and said, "That lower cabinet is only storage," even after the board member in pearls touched Nia's shoulder without quite touching her, guiding her back toward the office like a stain being moved away from a white tablecloth. Nia did not argue. She only watched the drawer until the metal seam disappeared into itself. Her fingers tightened around the receipt, and for the first time Graham noticed the edge of something else inside her lunchbox, wrapped in a napkin with a cartoon be-printed on it. The ribbon ceremony went on because expensive rooms had a talent for continuing while people inside them pretended not to hear what mattered. Cameras flashed. Cartwright spoke about wellness, access, and compassion. Graham stood beside the silver ribbon with scissors in his hand, but when he looked at the smiling children arranged for the photo, he found himself searching for pale blue inhaler caps. Nia was not in the picture. By late afternoon, rain had turned the school windows into gray mirrors. Graham sat in the back of his Escalade outside the side entrance, listening to the soft thud of wipers. Claire Benton handed him a folder of compliance summaries, each page clean, stamped, and uselessly perfect. "The school reports full adherence," she said. "Every clear breath unit accounted for." Graham kept looking through the tinted glass. Nia and her mother came out under a broken umbrella. Tasha Brooks wore navy scrubs under a thin raincoat, her hospital badge still clipped to her chest. She looked exhausted in the way working people looked when rest had become something they scheduled and never reached. Nia saw Graham watching, then reached into her lunchbox. Not quickly, carefully, like she had promised herself she would only show it if she had to. She walked to the car before her mother could stop her and held up the old phone with the cracked screen. "It only works on Wi-Fi," she said through the open window. "But it keeps recordings." Graham did not take it until she nodded. On the screen was one saved voice memo, 11 seconds long, dated Monday, 6:08 a.m. The sound was faint at first. A laundromat machine thumping below, a spoon tapping glass, Tasha's tired voice saying, "I emailed the form and I'm bringing the red folder." Then another voice, distant but clear enough, from a phone speaker on the kitchen table. Principal Cartwright, polite as porcelain. "Thank you, Mrs. Brooks. Nurse Voss will handle it personally. Mr. Whitaker cares deeply about children like Nia." Graham stared at the phone long after the recording ended. Children, like Nia. Caroline had hated that phrase. He could hear his wife in memory, standing barefoot in their kitchen years ago, telling him that charity became vanity the moment people said those children instead of our children. The rain tapped harder on the roof. Graham handed the phone back to Nia, but his eyes had gone somewhere colder. "Mrs. Brooks," he said quietly, "did Principal Cartwright call you herself?" Tasha nodded once. "She said not to worry." Graham looked toward the bright school lobby, where Elaine Cartwright was still smiling beside his wife's name on the wall, and for the first time that day, he stopped wondering whether Nia had misunderstood and started wondering why the principal had needed her mother to feel safe. Graham did not confront Elaine Cartwright in the lobby. He did not raise his voice beneath the bright donor lights or embarrass her in front of the photographers still packing away their cameras. He simply stepped back into the Escalade, closed the door softly, and let the rain blur the school into a shape of white columns and polished lies. Claire Benton watched him from the opposite seat, waiting. She had known him long enough to understand that his anger never arrived loudly. It arrived as precision. "I want the hallway footage," he said. "Original server file. Not a copy from the principal's office." Claire opened her tablet. "And the medication logs?" "All of them. Every clear breath unit delivered to Hawthorne Ridge this year. Include scholarship status if the school tracks it." The wipers swept once, twice, 3 times. Through the wet glass, Nia stood beneath the broken umbrella with her mother, refusing to get into the rideshare Graham's driver had offered to call. Tasha had thanked him politely, but Nia shook her head before her mother could answer. "We don't need a fancy car," she said, holding the lunchbox to her chest. "We need them to stop saying my mama didn't do what she did." Graham heard it through the half-open window, and it settled deeper than gratitude would have. Money was easy. Truth was not. That night, in their small apartment above the laundromat, the television murmured low in the kitchen while Tasha warmed soup on the stove. The machines downstairs thumped in tired circles, shaking the floor just enough to rattle a spoon against the rim of Nia's glass. Nia sat at the table with her old phone between both hands, watching the cracked screen glow as an email from Hawthorne Ridge appeared. "Behavioral review scheduled. Parent attendance required." Tasha read it twice without sitting down. "They're making it about you," she whispered. Nia looked at the yellow lunchbox on the chair beside her. "Because if it's about me, it's not about the drawer." Across town, inside Graham's stone house in Buckhead, a different kind of quiet pressed against the walls. No laundromat, no neighbors, no television. Only the low hum of a climate system and the rain tapping against tall windows. Claire sent the first file at 10:46 p.m. Graham opened it in his study beneath a framed photograph of Caroline cutting a hospital ribbon 15 years earlier. The hallway footage loaded cleanly at first. Nia by the nurse's office, Nurse Voss with the clipboard, Principal Cartwright smiling for donors. Then the image skipped. The timestamp jumped from 8 hours 13 minutes and 9 seconds to 8 hours 13 minutes and 56 seconds. 47 seconds gone. Graham leaned closer, his face lit blue by the screen. He played it again. Same gap. Then Claire called. The school says it's a routine camera sync error. Graham did not answer immediately. On his desk lay the compliance packet Cartwright had handed him that afternoon, signed in blue ink with her careful looping signature. Full adherence. No exceptions. He looked at Caroline's photograph, then at the frozen frame where the hallway disappeared for 47 seconds, and understood with a cold shame that he had not been fooled by a child's confusion. He had been comforted by an adult's polish. The next morning, Graham arrived at Hawthorne Ridge without cameras, without donors, and without the smile Elaine Cartwright had always seemed to expect from him. He wore a charcoal coat instead of a suit jacket, and the only people with him were Claire Benton, a quiet IT consultant named Daniel Ross, and Miles, his security chief, who carried a sealed laptop bag like it weighed more than money. Principal Cartwright met them in the administrative wing with Nurse Voss at her side. Both women looked composed, but not rested. A paper cup of coffee sat untouched on Cartwright's desk, the steam already gone. "Mr. Whitaker," Cartwright said, "I wish you had called before coming. Nia's behavioral review is this afternoon." "I know," Graham said. "That's why I'm here." His voice was so calm that Nurse Voss glanced at him twice, trying to measure where the danger was. Nia sat beside her mother in a chair near the wall, her yellow lunchbox on her knees. She looked smaller in that office than she had in the hallway, surrounded by framed awards, donor photographs, and a glass cabinet full of silver plaques. But her eyes did not wander. They stayed on the silver clipboard lying face down near Nurse Voss's elbow. Graham pulled a sealed envelope from his coat pocket and placed it on the desk. "Before the review," he said, "I'd like to clear up a simple documentation issue." Cartwright folded her hands. "Of course." Daniel set up the laptop. A tiny camera light blinked green at the top of the screen, then went dark. Nurse Voss noticed it and straightened. Graham turned to her. "Mrs. Voss, yesterday you said Nia's inhaler was never properly authorized. Is that still your position?" Nurse Voss nodded once. "Based on the file available to me, yes." "And there was no red folder?" "Correct." Nia's fingers tightened around the handle of her lunchbox. Graham looked at her, not to ask permission exactly, but to let her know he remembered who had carried the truth this far. Nia opened the lunchbox and took out the receipt, still sealed in its small plastic bag. Then she did something no adult in the room expected. She slid it across the desk, not to Graham, but to Nurse Voss. "Can you read the pickup time?" she asked. Nurse Voss hesitated. "That isn't necessary. It's just numbers," Nia said. The office became so still that the hum of the ceiling light seemed loud. Cartwright's phone began to vibrate on the desk, walking itself a fraction of an inch across the polished wood. No one touched it. Nurse Voss picked up the receipt with 2 fingers. 7:42, she said. Nia nodded. "Then how did you tell my mom at 6:08 that you would handle it personally if there was no file and no inhaler yet?" For the first time, Nurse Voss did not look at Cartwright. Cartwright looked at the sealed envelope. Graham opened it slowly and removed a printed transcript of the old phone recording, then placed it beside the receipt. "That was a very good question," he said. His tone did not change. "That made it worse." Nurse Voss set the receipt down, but her hand stopped halfway from the desk, as if she had forgotten what innocence was supposed to do with fingers. Nia looked at her and said, "You only called it missing after you knew I had proof." And in that quiet office, with Graham standing between the plaques and the child, Marlene Voss finally understood that Nia Brooks was no longer standing alone. The sealed envelope lay open between them, but it was not the envelope that changed the room. It was Nia's lunchbox. She kept one hand on the yellow plastic lid as if it were a small door she had decided when to open, not when adults allowed it. Principal Cartwright cleared her throat, her voice returning to that careful school office warmth. "This is becoming unnecessarily adversarial. We are here to discuss Nia's behavior, not speculate about administrative timing. Graham looked at Daniel Ross. Show the original. Daniel connected the sealed drive to the laptop. The screen stayed black for 2 long seconds, and in those 2 seconds, Cartwright's phone vibrated again, spinning slightly beside the cold coffee cup. Nurse Voss folded her hands so tightly the knuckles paled. A file appeared. Hallway security, original server backup, 8:12 a.m. The footage began silently. Nia at the nurse's door. Nurse Voss taking the inhaler, the silver clipboard under her arm. Then Nia leaned forward in her chair and said, "Not that camera." Everyone looked at her. Her voice stayed small but certain. "The one by Mrs. Lang's art room sees the trophy case. The trophy case sees the nurse door." Daniel paused. Graham turned slowly to the child. "How do you know that?" Nia touched the edge of her lunchbox. "Because Malik used to fix his hair in the glass before pictures." No one smiled. Daniel pulled up the second angle. The art hallway camera did not face the nurse's office directly, but the trophy case did what Nia remembered. In its dark reflection, warped by glass and gold medals, the nurse's doorway appeared like a secret being caught from the side. The footage played. Nurse Voss held Nia's inhaler under the light, read the label, then turned toward Principal Cartwright. The audio was faint, but clear enough when Daniel raised the volume. Cartwright's voice came first. "Keep the scholarship cases out of sight until after Whitaker leaves." Nurse Voss answered, "The Brooks girl has a receipt." Cartwright's reflection moved closer. "Then make it behavioral. Parents understand behavioral." Graham did not blink. The room had become soundless except for the faint hiss of the laptop speakers. The video continued another 12 seconds, and that was when the final sentence entered the room like cold water under a locked door. Cartwright pointed toward the new wellness wing, toward the blue Whitaker logo printed on every box of donated medication. "He funds stories, Marlene, not complications." Graham's face lost its color. It did not happen dramatically. The blood simply seemed to leave him, quietly, as if his own body had stepped away from what he had just heard. He looked at the screen, then at Nia, then through the glass wall toward the hallway where his dead wife's name shone in brushed silver letters above the clinic door. Caroline Whitaker Wellness Wing. Built for compassion. Used for concealment. He opened his mouth once, but no words came. Because the truth was not only that Nia had been right. The truth was that she had been right inside a building he had paid for, under a program he had praised, beneath a name he claimed to honor. Nia reached into her lunchbox and placed the pale blue inhaler on the desk. Label facing up, CB 2147 centered, beneath the fluorescent light. Graham looked at it for a long moment. Then he set his phone beside it, screen up, recording. His voice, when it finally came, was calm enough to frighten everyone. "Lock the server. Nobody touches another file." No one moved after Graham said it. The laptop still showed. The frozen reflection of the trophy case, Principal Cartwright's face bent in the glass like something caught underwater. Claire Benton stepped to the door and told Miles to keep the office closed. Not with force, not with drama, only with the calm authority of a woman who knew exactly what evidence sounded like when it stopped being rumor. Within an hour, Hawthorne Ridge's board chair was sitting in the same room where Nia had been asked to defend herself. By sundown, Nurse Voss had been placed on administrative leave pending termination. Principal Cartwright was removed from student records access, and the ClearBreath files were turned over to an outside investigator. The school tried briefly to call it a breakdown in procedure. Graham would not let them. He stood before the board the following week with Nia's inhaler on the table beside the printed transcript, the missing 47 seconds, the second camera angle, and the list of every scholarship child whose medication had been locked away under words like misuse risk and donor concern. He did not shout. He did not buy forgiveness. "This was not a clerical error," he said. "This was adults protecting comfort from children who needed care." Cartwright resigned before the report became public. Voss lost her nursing position and state regulators opened a formal review. Hawthorne Ridge was required to notify every affected family, reimburse medical costs, and accept an independent health advocate paid by Whitaker Medical Group but reporting to parents, not the school. Tasha Brooks did not accept charity disguised as pity. Graham offered money first because it was the language he knew, and Tasha's face made him understand how small that language could be. So Claire arranged legal protection for the Brooks family, back pay for Tasha's missed hospital shifts, transportation support that did not require gratitude, and a fully funded student health rights program named not after Graham, but after Caroline's original promise. Nia kept her scholarship, but the word scholarship stopped being whispered like a favor. A month later, the old locked cabinet was gone. In its place stood a clear glass medication station, with parent access logs, clinic verification, and a small blue card that read, "Believe the child. Check the record. Protect the breath." Graham returned on a quiet Friday afternoon with no photographers. The hallway smelled less like fresh paint now and more like crayons, floor cleaner, and the peanut butter sandwiches packed in children's bags. Nia stood beside the station with her yellow lunchbox, the sticker be peeling at one wing. Malik Reed was there too, holding his own inhaler, his mother's hand resting on his shoulder. Graham knelt, not to make a speech, but because eye level had become a kind of apology. "I should have looked sooner," he said. Nia considered him for a moment, then opened her lunchbox and showed him the old cracked phone, still wrapped in the cartoon napkin. "I'm keeping it," she said. "Not because I'm scared anymore. Because it reminds me I was telling the truth before anybody believed me." Graham could not answer right away. Down the hall, Tasha laughed softly at something Malik's mother said, and for once the sound did not have to fight the room to belong there. Nia closed the lunchbox, slipped the pale blue inhaler into its proper pocket, and walked back toward class while the adults stayed quiet behind her, finally listening.